ceremony. Haig and Ovchinin did, of course, have an abort after the launch of their Soyuz MS-10 mission, but both of them did get to go up and join the crews of Expedition 59 and 60, launching successfully aboard Soyuz MS-12 and completing their expedition aboard the International Space Station and safely returning to Earth. Again, the two reunited in space. Three Roscosmos cosmonauts in view. On this view on the right, who recently came through the pressurized mating adapter, was Ivan Wagner, Alexei Ovchinin, now making his way through pressurized mating adapter. Alexander Gurbankin, currently taking the frame in the black shirt. All Expedition 72 crew members will be present when Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov ingress the International Space Station. It's part of a formal welcoming ceremony. We'll continue our coverage until the crew and the ground teams have an opportunity to provide remarks during that ceremony. Right now, again, the Node 2 hatch in the foreground of this view, as well as the APAS hatch, both on the International Space Station side that's in the background, much further into the pressurized mating adapter. Both of them are open. As the teams in space now, both on the International Space Station side as well as the Dragon side, both ready for opening up the final hatch. So again, the astronauts in space are ready to go, just waiting for those ground teams and finding ways to pass the time.
Station and Dragon Houston on the big loop. Stand by for equalization. We're expecting it to take 3 to 4 minutes.
Hey, copy that. Jim copies.
This is Mission Control Houston. For those tuning in, we're continuing to wait for one last step of allowing the hatch pressure to equalize before opening up the final hatch. We've been working through hatch opening sequences over the past hour or so, about an hour and a half since docking at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. The ground teams have instructed the astronauts on board to wait until equalization is achieved before proceeding to open up with the hatch. Hoping to hear that call momentarily. This is a view from inside Dragon Freedom. NASA astronaut Commander Nick Hague in the background there on the comms. Mission specialist Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov there in the foreground. This is Mission Control Houston. You're getting views from both inside the Dragon Freedom cabin as well as from inside the International Space Station Node 2. Astronauts on board both vehicles waiting patiently. We're waiting for a go from ground teams analyzing the pressure inside each of the respective spacecraft and waiting for a go to open up that last hatch, Dragon hatch.
Freedom, SpaceX for suit dry.
I was with you.
All right, we're happy with the suit dry timer now, so you are go for commanding the suit fan off before we step into hatch opening.
Okay, copy that. We'll turn off the suit fan.
CNS astronaut Nick Hague working on the displays, the console there inside Dragon Freedom. The command to disable those suit fans is on that console. Suit fan and suit drying procedures are done after doffing suits through various phases of spaceflight. For these two astronauts, after doffing the suits after orbital insertion, suit drying was part of the procedures there as well, before they were once again donned prior to the approach initiation burn. Those suits were doffed again after the docking sequence was complete. That includes a soft capture.
Freedom, SpaceX on the big loop. We see the suit fans are off, so at this time you are go for hatch opening per the decal, followed by the remaining actions in 4.400 section 6.
Copies. We're going to open the hatch per decal and then the remaining steps in section 6, 4.400.
Good, readback, and we'll just follow up after hatch open on the completion of 4.012 as well, but we can go ahead and step into the hatch hops.
Okay, copy that.
With that from the SpaceX mission control teams in Hawthorne, California, relaying that the suit fan command has been successfully initiated and they are go to open up the hatch. We got a great view from inside the space station here, and we're starting to see it illuminate. And now, with that, we confirm Dragon hatch is open. 6:04 p.m. Central.
Next Freedom hatch is open.
Copy, hatch open.
Freedom arriving.
Bell has been rung. Alexander Gorbanov, the first through of Crew 9, being welcomed by Expedition 72. Next up is Crew 9 Commander Nick Hague. Crew 9 now aboard the International Space Station and joining Expedition 72. pockets of carbon dioxide that you just want to filter out as part of the hatch opening sequences, again, as a safety measure. This is one of those quirks when working in microgravity. Now getting views from inside the International Space Station, you can see the crew now working together to open up the APAS hatch. The view you're looking at is from the Node 2 Harmony module, looking inside the pressurized mating adapter. This is NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps, one of the NASA astronauts assigned with the hatch opening operations.
Station of the big loop as step 2.4 APAS equalization valve closed at 21:58.
Houston copies 21:58.
The voice you heard from inside the International Space Station is appearing on screen now. NASA astronaut Matt Dominic relaying some of the steps as they work through the necessary procedures to open up the hatch. Now, what we didn't talk about so far is on the other side of the APAS hatch is what's called a vestibule. It's a gap between the two hatches of the International Space Station and Dragon. This is inside the interface of the International Docking Adapter. It's just a gap, but that gap right now is a vacuum, is at vacuum. The sequence now that the astronauts will undergo is pressurizing that vestibule up to match that of the cabins of the International Space Station as well as Dragon Freedom. The pressure inside each of those vehicles matches that of the pressure of Earth at sea level, 14.9 pounds per square inch. Appearing on the left side of your screen, another NASA astronaut, Butch Wilmore, who again, earlier today helped out with setting up the rendezvous and monitoring tools needed for Matt Dominic and Mike Barrett today to monitor the Crew 9's approach and docking to the International Space Station. Procedures for hatch opening sequences do not need to be memorized by the astronauts on board. They do have reference material. NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps holding a tablet and referencing some of the step-by-step sequences that need to be followed to ensure a safe pressurization of the vestibule and the hatch opening sequence needed to welcome the Crew 9 astronaut and cosmonaut aboard the International Space Station. Teams aboard the International Space Station working with the flight control teams both in Hawthorne as well as here in Mission Control Houston. Through a docking sequence, the attitude control of the International Space Station itself is changed at various increments and spots through the docking sequence. As a visiting vehicle approaches the International Space Station, some of the thrusters and what are called desats, which allow the dampening of a control moment gyro to reset it once it reaches maximum rotation velocity, are disabled. And prior to a hard dock, the station is on control moment gyros only. The attitude determination control officer here in Mission Control Houston is reconfiguring this station's attitude control such that some of the attitude control assets are being re-enabled, including some of the desats and thrusters. Dragon Freedom and the International Space Station flying together over the Earth. We're now over an orbital daytime. Station and Dragon are approximately 260 statute miles northeast off the coast of Australia, just over the Coral Sea. We're a little more than 30 minutes after the docking of Dragon Freedom to the International Space Station. That docking again occurred at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, 2:30 p.m. East, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Again, all the teams are working on the hatch opening operations. Commander Nick Hague and Mission Specialist Alexander Gorbanov inside Dragon, the view of which you can see right here, are undergoing suit doffing procedures, taking off their suits and configuring the Dragon cabin for the hatch opening sequence, including opening up of the Dragon hatch on their side. In the meantime, NASA astronauts inside the International Space Station are working on opening up the hatches on the station side. To the right of this view, where Dragon is currently attached to the station, is the International Docking Adapter that meets the two hatches, Dragon and International Space Station A-Pass hatches. And right on the right of your screen there, you can see the pathway on the right. That's down through the pressurized mating adapter, the black structure there on the left. You can sort of make it out, but on the towards the very back end of the pressurized mating adapter is a hatch. That's the one they're going to be working on opening. But first comes the pressurization of the vestibule in between the two hatches. That vestibule currently is at vacuum, and it's going to take some time to bring up to vacuum. In fact, it happens in a couple of steps. Right now, from vacuum, it needs to be brought up to 14.7 psi. It's not done in one swoop. It's done incrementally. First, it's brought up to 5 pounds per square inch and held there.
Freedom SpaceX for awareness. ISS power connection established.
As part of the docking sequence, the very last step prior to the docking sequence being completed is the deployment of an umbilical from the Dragon to the International Space Station. That umbilical connects the Dragon to pull from the power and connect the data through a hard wire in between the International Space Station and the Dragon Freedom. Dragon, until that point, has been operating its power off of the batteries on board as well as the solar arrays that are on the trunk, very apparent on the black section of the unpressurized trunk from the external view of the Dragon. Those have been providing power up until this moment, where we just confirmed through that big loop that the umbilical that connects the International Space Station and allows Dragon to pull from the International Space Station's power, that's been completed and is in work. Dragon now on the International Space Station power, no longer needing to rely on the batteries and solar arrays. We're getting views, live views, from the International Space Station as it flies 257 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean. These views are cameras being set up and configured inside Node 2 by the NASA astronauts themselves to provide views from the station to us down here on the ground to monitor the operations. Of course, aside from opening up the hatches, will be a welcoming ceremony. We'll see the smiling faces of Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov enter into the International Space Station and be welcomed.
Freedom for a status.
Ready to copy.
Yeah, we started the 1-hour timer for the suit drying 8 minutes ago, and I am ready in section 3 with an inventory when you're ready to copy.
Okay, 1-hour timer 8 minutes ago, so we'll be looking for that in about 50 minutes to complete suit drying, and I'm ready to copy inventory.
Okay, for water, in bag 201, consumed 2 bottles. In 202, consumed all 5 bottles. In 204, consumed 5 bottles. All 5 bottles.
All right, we copy that. 2 bottle from 201, all 5 from 202, all 5 from 204.
It's a good readback, and that includes the flush bottle we're going to use here shortly. For food, we consumed everything in 303, 304, and 1 meal from 308.
All right, SpaceX copies. The water includes flush bottle, and then all food 303, all food 304, 1 meal 308.
That's a good readback. We're going to do the flush on the commode, and then I'll call down and let you guys come aboard.
SpaceX copies.
That report comes from Commander Nick Hague aboard Dragon Freedom. Dragon outfitted with the necessary consumables between 2 crew members. Those consumables are tracked and reported to ground teams. So the amount of food and water on board is known for the ride both uphill and downhill. The teams want to make sure that the astronauts have what they need, both for nominal situations and situations in which additional orbits may be necessary for a returning crew to Earth. That is carefully tracked by the ground teams in order to make sure the astronauts have what they need.
Station and Dragon Houston on the big loop. For awareness, we are configuring Dragon for hardline audio.
Okay, copy that. Copies.
Now again, there is an umbilical that connects Dragon Freedom to the International Space Station. We did talk about the power. That power connection is confirmed. Dragon is pulling power from the International Space, no longer needing to rely on the solar arrays and batteries aboard. The umbilical also provides a data connection. The audio on board Dragon and aboard the space station to this point has been configured separately through a big loop configuration and a wireless configuration is the common communication for visiting. Checks on the hard line may be coming after that hard line is established. In the meantime, we continue to wait. Hatch opening operations are a game of patience. The vestibule again has been exposed to vacuum. And the extremes into a reading of a pressure as it is brought up to the pressure of the International Space Station. They can fly and provide a false reading of a leak. To counteract this, the teams simply wait. With that, the International Space Station Capcom test Caswell has tested the hardline config through that umbilical that connects Dragon Freedom to the International Space Station to the crew inside Freedom. Still on the big loop, although it's reconfigured for hardline communications, that's been successfully established.
Station Houston on 2 for the leak check. Heads up, we're expecting about 5 minutes.
Okay, copy another. Okay, copy another.
As a reminder, as the vestibule is pressurized in between the station hatch and the Dragon hatch to ensure that the leak check is solid, it's just a matter of wait. The vestibule's exposure to vacuum prior to Dragon's arrival introduces thermal fluctuations that can give a false reading of a leak. So, when the vestibule is being pressurized, simply waiting can allow some of those thermal fluctuations to dampen out and get a very good reading of whether or not there is a leak on board. This is standard procedure with every docking to the International Space Station, of course, to this forward port. Just following procedures, allowing another few minutes to make sure that it's a good reading and there are no leaks before continuing to press for introducing more pressure into that vacuum space, that vestibule. Again, the target pressure that we're going for here is to match that of the International Space Station and Dragon cabins, 14.7 psi, pounds per square inch.
Houston Station on 2, if you're happy with our DPDT, which we're showing 0.02, feet on your go.
Dominic.
We're complete through section 5, standing by section 6. You can come aboard.
All right, SpaceX copies that, Freedom. Complete through Section 5, standing by in Section 6, 4.400, brings cameras on board. 4.400, brings cameras on board.
As the crew on board the International Space, the steps to pressurize the vestibule in between with the crew of Crew 9 enabling onboard video. We now have views from inside the cabin after docking. This is inside Dragon Freedom Live right now. NASA astronaut Nick Hague at the top of the screen. Just off to the right there, mission specialist Alexander Gorbanov, Roscosmos cosmonaut, the two of them, are working through the procedures to open up the hatch, configure the cabin that you're seeing there inside Dragon before opening up the hatch and entering the International Space Station. You see the suits that they wore for launch as well as docking are in the seated positions. Right now they're in a configuration such that they can be dried in between use. Aside from the next dynamic operation, which will be undocking for the Crew 9 crew, they may perform a series of tests with the suits, but otherwise their mission now will be converted from Crew 9, the transit from Earth to the International Space Station, to join the mission of Expedition 72, which is continued science, research, and discovery aboard the International Space Station. Now getting views from the two spacecraft. Again, there is a hatch, multiple hatches actually. We are seeing that the A-Pass hatch is open on the International Space Station side. The vestibule in between the two spacecraft have been pressurized to meet that of sea level on the ground. Position where Hague and Gorbanov currently are very close to the Dragon hatch. Now with the A-Pass hatch opened, some of the flashes you were seeing from inside the pressurized mating adapter were cameras and the flashes of the cameras to inspect the hatch, make sure there's no foreign object debris, just a safety measure and precaution to make sure that nothing is in the way. That will be documented and relayed to the ground for inspection, make sure everything's good. Some of the many steps of these hatch opening procedures that we've been referencing. This is Mission Control Houston following along. Again, the APAS hatch is open. This is the last hatch on the International Space Station side. There's one more hatch to go, and that's on the Dragon side. Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov currently waiting patiently inside Dragon Freedom, going through their incremental steps to make sure the hatches can be opened at a safe time. You saw the NASA astronauts in the pressurized mating adapter bring in white cloth. This is part of the procedures of outfitting the hatch for ingress. The hatch itself is metallic and has been exposed to vacuum. As a safety measure, the hatch itself is being covered with this white cloth. There's also a docking fixture that's used. It's sort of a pole that sticks out from the back end of the APAS hatch. That has been removed, as it is an obstacle to crews ingressing through that hatch. Working through the steps incrementally. The crew seems to be on the timeline right now, so we're expecting the hatch opening to happen within the next 30 minutes or so of Dragon. Right now we're looking at a gap in our video coverage from the station. Hoping to beat that gap so we can see some of the crew members enter. But we will be providing continuous coverage through that hatch opening and when the crew are formally welcomed on board the International Space Station. There will be a formal ceremony. In this shot that you're seeing right now, you can actually see the bell, ceremonial bell, which will be rung upon the ingress of the two crew members on board Dragon Freedom, welcoming them and joining Expedition 72, rounding out 11 members of 72. Three-box view that you're seeing from inside the station on the bottom right, inside Dragon, bottom left. Again, NASA astronaut Nick Hague on the top right corner of the screen. From that Dragon cabin view, Gorbanov you see behind some of the seats on the view from the bottom left. And we are seeing Dragon illuminated by the sun a little bit until an orbital sunset. As expected just minutes from now, the views on the outside of station will become a little darker as the station and Dragon pass 260 statute miles over the northern Atlantic Ocean. More Expedition 72 crew members starting to come into view. In the red shirt there on the left, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin, former crewmate of Nick Hague. On his Soyuz flight to the International Space Station, they rode together aboard a Soyuz to the International Space Station and joined for their expedition before returning, now reunited in space.
Station on the big loop. Step 4.8 is complete. Step 4.9 station is ready for Dragon hatch equalization.
We copy, Mike. We are not quite ready on our side. We'll let you know when we are.
Holding at 4.9.
Mike Barrett relaying that the crew is ready for hatch equalization, doing a few things on the ground.
SpaceX Freedom on the big loop. Crew's holding in 4.9. We're ready for the hatch to come open.
All right, SpaceX copies. We'll be waiting for the ground to be ready for equalization, and that's going to keep us in section 6 of 4.400. You'll see